Welcome back to another episode of the Return of the Roar Sacramento Kings podcast on Sactown Sports 1140. My name is Brenden Nunes. Got my two co-hosts here, as we always do. Chris Watkins starting out. What's going on, Chris? How you feeling, man?
Good, man. I went to the game the other day. The who did they just play yesterday? The Nuggets game. As a fan, and that was really nice. I think the last game I went to as a fan was the Keegan Murray 47-point explosion. So I had some lofty expectations, and it was definitely an exciting game. Definitely one that probably won't forget for a long time. So I guess I'm doing well.
Yeah, exciting game, I think, is the right way to say it. Yeah.
I saw a lot of social accounts post like, "Oh, look at the last minute 15 seconds of the Kings Nuggets game last night. Like, this is basketball at its finest." And I was like, I don't remember thinking that in the moment, but I'm glad others appreciated it.
Same. I was looking for the Mike Malone post-game stuff this morning, and it's like Jamal Murray hits game winner over Sacramento Kings. And I was like, gosh, I didn't even think of that as the highlight, but I guess that's kind of what happened. Also got Frankie Cartoscelli here, of course. What's going on, Frank? How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm great. Yeah, beautiful basketball. I mean, I don't know if that's how I really viewed last night's game, if other people are pushing it that way. But I will say it was entertaining basketball. Maybe not beautiful, but entertaining. Obviously, I think we could be having – there's two games in a row I guess we could have different conversations. If CJ McCollum hits one more three in New Orleans the other night, we're having a different conversation. And last night, if DeMar DeRozan doesn't drop the ball, among other things, obviously, we're having a different conversation as well. But I think as a whole, like, I'm pretty neutral right now on the Kings. And personally, also neutral. Holidays are coming. Not a huge Christmas guy. Trying to get in the spirit.
What?
Not really feeling it right now.
Huge Christmas guy?
I'm not feeling the spirit so far. I told you guys before we started recording, my sister and her boyfriend are come over tomorrow night. We're watching Jim Carrey's The Grinch. We're going to watch the Charlie Brown Christmas. Apparently Shrek the Halls is a short. There's a Shrek the Halls, like a Christmas movie for Shrek.
You're sounding like a Christmas guy, but right now.
Well, we're trying our best, but I don't know, man. Maybe having a kid will help. I think having the little guy around coming up here, he'll help. But I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
Don't sleep on the animated Grinch. It's really good.
It is the throwback one. That one's really good.
No, the newer one. The one with Pharrell curated the playlist and everything. It's
with
I'm a big fan. It's Benedict Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch. He's a good Grinch, huh?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Is he having like his accent? Is it the accent make
no
it?
Accent, no accent. Kenan Thomas is in it. He's great. He's hilarious. He's my favorite. And it's a good vibe. Tyler the Creator is involved in the soundtrack too. It's just it's a different vibe of the Grinch, but I really like it and I think it's funny.
Okay. I'll check it out. Brenden, you have a favorite Christmas
recommendation?
Favorite Christmas movie?
God, I have no clue. Probably the Grinch, I guess I would say.
Jim Carrey?
I think that, yeah, for sure. I haven't seen the one Chris is talking about, actually. I honestly hardly knew it existed until you said that right now.
I
wouldn't call myself a big Christmas guy either. I do like Elf, actually. Elf's a classic.
We watched that one the other day, and that one is a banger. And now as a grown man, I'm like looking back on it as that's Sonny from The Godfather. Like literally, it's James Caan is Sonny in The Godfather, and he is playing Buddy the Elf's dad. And apparently, Will Ferrell has said, like in an interview, that the way how his fictional dad was acting to him in the movie was real. Apparently, he's like, I think James Caan like really hated me. Like I think it was like genuine how he was like,
you're a man child.
Yeah, he was like talking trash to him and stuff. So yeah, I'll give you an update. I think we'll probably record one more time before. Which we're talking about
next week, man.
I know. We're talking. I know it's next week, and I know we're talking about this right now. But I think I told our colleague Verla that we pre-record something on the 23rd. Yeah, so I guess we'll probably talk one more time before then.
Okay.
Catch us on the air. Catch us on the airwaves.
Absolutely. And I guess a little premature, but the Grinch in Sacramento last night was Nikola Jokic, Mike Malone, Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray. Like you probably have a couple options. Really. But I think the story is kind of carryover from what we were talking about a lot in the last episode, Mike Brown's possession after possession rant, which I appreciate how much he's aware that became a meme, because he's referenced multiple times since that. I'm not going to repeat it 27 times, 26 times, whatever it was. But his whole point was the inconsistencies, not only on a game-to-game basis, but on a possession-to-possession basis with the Sacramento Kings. And I think last night, and you mentioned it too, Frank, that New Orleans game falls into this too, but I kind of thought last night was a prime example of that, really. I mean, you allow the Nuggets to have 41 points in the first quarter. You're down 20 at the end of the first quarter. And then you come out in the second quarter and you have a season high 47 points in the second quarter. They did still allow 34. And then third quarter, outscore them by 14, 35-21, and a slow fourth quarter that I want to say ended with something along the lines. I should have this number in front of me, but I don't. Like a 21-10 run or something along those lines that Denver closed the game on. Okay. But I mean, what do you make of these inconsistencies? It seems like a lot of it has to do with defensively. Since Malik Monk moved into the starting lineup 7 games ago, they're top of the league in offensive rating still, 123.7. Defense is sitting about 18th during that time, 19th, one below the Pacers. But they're scoring out of their mind. To me, it feels like it's defensive inconsistencies, and then also obviously that maybe down the stretch execution when it comes to offense. But what are you guys seeing when it comes to the potential causes of what can change possession to possession, quarter to quarter with this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're kind of overcompensating on the offensive end, and we've seen how successful the team has been on the offensive end, and I hate to kind of keep pointing fingers back to the depth in the bench, but I mean, the thing that sticks out to me, and a lot of things stick out. I'm sure we'll dive into the first quarter. It was horrific. The last 4 minutes, even kind of reverting back to how they started the game. The attention on the defensive end wasn't really there. That the Nuggets got hot, but I keep going back to the fact that, and I think I looked at you, Brenden. I've done it a couple of times the past couple of home games, really. I mean, this year in general, and just kind of said, do you see this lineup on the floor right now? I think it was Fox, McDermott, Isaac Jones, Colby Jones, Keon Ellis.
Yeah.
Missing somebody. And I can't help but just look back at those moments and say, the starting 5 is great. I think we can say that the Sacramento Kings starting 5 is very, very good. And I think the numbers would tell us that as well. Even the lineups with the 5-man lineups with Kevin Huerter, I think had a +7 net rating. I mean, good starting 5. De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, even Keegan, those guys get the job done when they're on the floor. Last night in particular, no Kevin Huerter, no Keegan Murray, no Trey Lyles. Those minutes where they didn't have 2 or 3 of those main starters on the floor were a train wreck. And you saw it early in the game too. And I think Mike kind of found the right mix in the middle of the game, and the Kings really kind of went on a run there. But I kind of look back at just that familiar, foe of the depth and how thin this team is, and how Denver was able to kind of survive and stay afloat with Nikola Jokic on the bench in the fourth quarter. I think that was another thing you brought up, Brenden, later, was Jokic has been on the bench for a little longer than we thought. And I don't think the Kings can get away with that. I mean, they had their main guys on the floor in crunch time, and it still wasn't enough. And yeah, it's an experienced Nuggets team. They have the guys that have, the core that's won a championship. They have Michael Malone, who's been around for a long time. I mean, Kings fans know him well. But I think it's a matter of no excuses, really. The Kings came back from 23 points down. They found a way to not only take the lead, but have a commanding lead with just a handful of minutes left. And, maybe the depth was the main reason. Maybe the fact that they still have been a horrific 3-point shooting team and the Nuggets got hot down the stretch was the main reason why. But the point is, like, just that familiar conversation that we'll continue to have until it changes is this team just doesn't seem thin enough really to compete where they want to in the West.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's definitely a lot of what you just said, Frank. I think it's a lot of personnel in general. I just feel like when you look at this team, I don't really know where the defenders are at. Like, I mean, if we just look at it from an individual basis, even, like, obviously you can be a good collective team defense, but you have De'Aaron Fox, who I think we can say is an above average defender. Where exactly you want to put him, we can debate all day, but I would say he's just in general an above average defender. I think Keegan Murray is, on his good days, like, definitely an above average defender. And then besides that, I don't really know individually where the Kings are supposed to be getting their stops. Like, they don't have a rim protector. They don't have guys that really consistently fight on the defensive end and really take pride on that end of the floor. All of their guys really do kind of cook on the offensive end. Even the guys I just listed, they're two above average defensive players, Keegan Murray and De'Aaron Fox. At the end of the day, those guys are supposed to be offensive weapons as well. And obviously in this league, you're supposed to be both. But I think the problem is the Kings just have an offensive roster and they can't. I mean, this is what we saw in the Beam Team season. They're back to having a ridiculous offense, but their defense, because of the personnel that allows them to be such a great offense, doesn't really at the same time allow them to be a high-level defense. I think it's why so many people are out here clamoring for the Dorian Finney-Smith, the Cam Johnson trade. Just make it now. It's because I think we all see, I just don't think that there's much defensive talent on this team, and I think there's some teams that for whatever reason are able to get by and collectively buy in and excel when maybe they shouldn't on that end of the floor, but for whatever reason, we've seen it for 3 straight years now. This Kings team has needed to play defense since day one that Mike Brown stepped in. Mike Brown has been preaching defense since day one that he stepped in. And this team has just not, I don't know if they haven't bought in. I don't know if they're not capable of it. But at this point, I think it's crazy to try and hold out hope that at some point a switch is going to be flipped. And all of a sudden, they're just going to become a stable to an above-average defense. I just think that this is the life that they're going to live until they actually make personnel changes. And, who knows when that'll happen, but I just think that it's not going to happen with this collection of guys.
Yeah, and just kind of laughing a little because, as you said, it's the same conversation we've had for, since Mike Brown got here. This would be the 3rd year at least. It probably predates that even.
I think Chris and I have had a similar conversation like 6 years ago.
Yeah,
I think I get memories that pop up of like on my Facebook or like when we started the podcast a long time ago. I think Chris and I were in that studio down the hall having talks about how horrible the Kings defense was during the beginning of the Luke Walton era, and it's like in the fabric of their DNA. They are not able to play defense as soon as they put on those threads. It doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. Like I don't, since like the Artest Adelman Kings, they have not been able to play defense.
You know what's funny, real quick? I was just watching NBC Sports posted their NBC Central or whatever they call it of interviews with Mike Bibby and C-Web actually, and C-Web actually mentioned I just thought it was interesting that he kind of mentioned that. Everyone talks about their offense, how, how revolutionary their offense was. But then when mentioning their defense, kind of said that they, too, don't really have great individual defenders on that team. But he mentioned that their offense was so good that they used that as a weapon on defense. And that just really made my ears perk up and think, well, that seems like the logic for what they want with this squad, but for whatever reason, maybe it's that there's some counterbalance. I don't know, but for whatever reason, they haven't found that offensive threshold that makes you forget about defense really since that Beam Team season when it was first one to 130 wins. And frankly, that's literally what we saw yesterday in that in that Nuggets game. First one to 130 won that game. That is a classic Beam Team game.
So this is the 01-02 year. Is that best year, right, for the Kings?
Yes.
Some will say that was from a record standpoint the best team, yes, but some will argue that the 02-03 team was better. But yes.
Okay. I can even tell you both real quick. 01-02, right? 61-22. 3rd in offensive rating. 107.9, by the way, is 3rd in offensive rating.
Per 100 possessions.
Yes.
107 points.
Which also says, by the way, it was just kind of like dealing with playing defense, probably a little bit more complicated now. But they were also 5th in defensive rating, 99.7 that year. I think point stands like, if he wants to say they weren't an elite defensive team or didn't have like the talent necessarily in that regard, right? The other year we said was 03-04.
02-03. The next year, that was the year that, not to bring up, but when Chris Webber, he got hurt.
Yeah. 59-23 this year, 104.4 offensive rating, 6th in the league.
Wow.
and a 97.8 defensive rating, second in the league.
Wow.
Behind the New Jersey Nets. Still effective defensively for sure throughout those years on those teams. But, I think both of you guys mentioned it. I think the struggle for Mike Brown is that he's not in a spot where he can just be like, we just don't have the guys defensively. Like he has to try to get the best out of all of them. He'll often use the comparison of like it's raising a kid. If they're bad at math and good at geography, you're not just going to say, all right, let's just focus on geography and screw the math grade. You're still going to try to get the best you can out of that. And so I think he's trying to do that, but like Keon Ellis has 5 blocks. I think Malik Monk had 3 blocks, and like blocks are not the end all be all. I think Malik's actually been way better this year defensively throughout the course of this season, but I kind of want to come back to the DeMar thing. I'm hesitating because I kind of feel bad, and I know people don't love this conversation, but he helps you offensively. I don't think he was ever going to fix or really aid much of anything for this team defensively. And also, by the way, Keegan Murray being out of this game with left ankle soreness, I think is definitely a big part of it as well. I think he'd be the one that you typically assign to Aaron Gordon, and that's what DeMar was.
Did that come out of nowhere, by the way? I mean, I did not go to practice this week. Was he at practice before that happened?
He was at practice. I'd have to go back and look at the video, but I'm pretty sure that I saw him out there at shoot around as well. But there was no word of it at shoot around that morning. And was he on the bench last night? I didn't get a chance to look at the bench. I saw Trey. Trey looked sharp. I think Chris brought up Trey was in his Harrison Barnes suit, looking fitted. I think you're muted, Chris. Keegan was there. Keegan was in some like sweatsuit, hoodie,
Keegan
just chilling. Just a chill guy.
Are you guys talking about if Kevin was on the bench yesterday?
Keegan, yeah.
Keegan was in the second row of the bench. I mentioned Kevin because I saw Kevin sitting at the end of the bench at the first half. Second half was literally nowhere to be seen. I saw Trey and Keegan the whole game, but it looked like Kevin might have left at halftime.
Well, just wondering,
might have been in the tunnel or anything, but yeah.
Well, just wondering, and not to get you off your point, Brenden. Sorry. With the Keegan thing, it just kind of is interesting because I think it purely speculative. Obviously, just the fact that it popped up out of nowhere has me wondering how severe is it? Because the Kings, they keep things very, very close to the vest. They don't reveal any information. We can get an email at any time or a notice at any time about what the timeline is or how he's doing,
or we could never get an email.
Or we could never get one, and he'll just be day to day, and they don't want to reveal anything, which is fine. They're being protective of their guys. I get it. I think as a player, you probably feel pretty comfortable playing for a team like that, but as a journalist, it's frustrating.
I thought you were going to say like, "Oh, is Keegan about to get traded or something?" I was like,
"No,
Frank, you're in real doomsday mode."
That's where that was going.
No, but that's what people on social media, which is not a shocker, were reacting. He was on the injury report until 1:30. It's like, well, he might have hurt his ankle in shoot around. We don't know what happened. I mean, Fox got a grade 2 ankle sprain in practice a couple years ago, and that put him out for a couple of weeks. So it seems like it's not a big deal. Mike did not seem concerned. And then also just a quick side note before we get back to the basic point, the main points here. Trey, according to Sean Cunningham, is potentially back on Thursday against the Lakers, which would be a nice boost because to kind of get it back to you, Brenden, like, yeah, Mike, I think he kind of hasn't like put out there bluntly, this team doesn't have the defensive personnel to do what I want them to do. So we're going to emphasize offense. But, you see that they struggle against teams with length. I mean, Aaron Gordon had a field day. He had 14 points in the first quarter, I think 28 on the night last night. I mean, the Kings just don't have anybody that can equalize a sizable forward or a sizable big, really. I mean, Domas is holding his own. And the Kings, as a team, entering play last night, they had the second best paint defense in the NBA. They allowed 42 points per game in the paint. Got completely just destroyed. 76 last night. I checked today. They dropped from second to fourth from last night alone. So I do feel like that's kind of it's a repetitive issue that they don't have the personnel. Maybe getting Trey Lyles back will help. Having Keegan back, like you were starting to mention before I cut you off again, I apologize. But you're fine. That obviously will help, but I do think it's a matter of personnel, and Mike isn't going to, bang his fist and say, "Bring me players that can actually play defense."
JTA.
He's out there. He's out there. But at the same time, I mean, I think that some of the lineups he's throwing out there, it's kind of saying like I'm playing who I'm given. Like he's throwing Jay Crowder out there for a minute and gave him a quick hook. Isaac Jones has gotten a quick hook as of late. He needs experienced defenders out there.
There's no tone setter in that starting group defensively, in my mind, and I think that's part of moving Malik in there. I do think Malik is a tone setter in general, actually, so maybe that's not fair to him, and I don't think there's necessarily an option on the bench that's doing it. But like in this game specifically, I did think that Keon and Colby came in and sort of changed the energy, at least of that group a little bit, and it was a classic. Like Mike Brown thinks guys aren't cutting it. Doug McDermott got the starting job, and then maybe 5 minutes into the game, a little less. Jay Crowder comes in, as you mentioned there, Frank. That looks like obviously a focus on defense. They gave up 3 offensive rebounds on the first 3 possessions. You mentioned the 76 points in the paint throughout the whole game, 50 in the first half, which I guess you could say that means there was progress in the second half, but it was pretty bad. Mike Brown pointed out the backdoor cuts. He thought they gave up more in this game than maybe they did all year long in any other matchup. And DeMar DeRozan is the one assigned to Aaron Gordon when normally it's Keegan. I thought Aaron Gordon specifically was kind of feasting in those dunker spots. And I would say that's one of DeMar's biggest weaknesses in my mind is that off-ball defense. And he's certainly not the only one, though. I think not having a tone setter on that end does make a decent difference here. Somebody that this is kind of why Mike Brown typically is not that Mo Harkless is a guy deserving of a starting spot, or
Talk about
who else am I not
KZ
remembering?
Okpala.
There you go.
KZ
Okpala.
Mo Harkless, down the
Yep.
well, JTA. Did he start a game?
He closed one.
Probably.
He closed that Phoenix game last year. I remember like he had just gotten signed to his 10-day, and he had him guarding Devin Booker for game. We'll never forget it.
Are we forgetting anybody?
The name Daquan Jeffries come to mind, but I know that
That
predates
doesn't
Mike.
count. Yeah, that doesn't count.
There was a game or two where I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. KZ
Promise.
was just the continuation of Mo Harkless experiment.
It was.
Yeah.
It was very much same vibes. But I just, Mike is going to say that, well, look at what we did in, I guess maybe the third quarter is a better example in the second because they still gave up 34, even if they scored 47 in that second quarter. Third quarter, they held them to 21 points. Like I would think in Mike's mind, it's like, well, there's stretches where we do play good defense. And I see why that's what you would go back to. But they need help when it comes to that aspect. And I think the other side is if you're going to be elite offensively and leaning on that. And again, I'm sure Mike doesn't love to hear that. He's going to say, well, no, they need to be better defensively in that game last night. And I think that's true. It's just, first of all, it doesn't make good conversation, to be honest, because what are we going to say that, I mean, all the post-game stuff, even, it honestly didn't make for a very good post-game because Mike has kind of, in his mind, probably has no choice but to sit there and be like, we have to be locked in. We have to try harder. Somebody tried to ask Malik and De'Aaron, like, how do you guys do that? They kind of chuckled, like, we just have to do it, and there's not much more than that, really, right, guys?
No, I mean it's a matter of focus. It's a matter of paying attention when you're letting your mind wander for even half a second. It's not getting beat back door like Mike Brown clearly preached to his team all post game yesterday. Like it's not really anything tangibly you can do, and that's why I just kind of think that it is a personnel thing. I do think defense to an extent. Now we've heard Keon's, on defense, I just try and think of what I'm going to do on offense and try and predict that. I don't even know how true that is or how much it's just a good soundbite, but I think defense is something that you just have or you don't. You have either your entire life cared about the defensive end or you think that it's just a way of getting on offense. Like, I think that just fundamentally, that's how a lot of basketball players treat it. And, especially now in the NBA, like, I just kind of think that that's the reality of a lot of guys. Now, obviously, there's people who can persevere through that. But, I really don't know if there's any way that you can try and increase the focus of a team. I mean, the only way that I can think, and I don't think they're there yet, but heads have to start to roll. Like, that's how you get teams to lock in, is if they start to feel the urgency, the severity of their actions. And I hate to say it because I definitely don't think this is what they're intending to do, but the way this Kings team has been playing this season, they're playing like they're trying to get Mike Brown fired. Like, that's what's going to happen if they continue to play this way. It just is. You see already in the offseason, there were some questions on, hey, how committed is this front office, this ownership group to Mike Brown? I think with how this team is playing right now, you kind of leave these decision makers in no other place except for, well, Monty could make a trade and bring in personnel, but the reality of the situation, the human element is that's also kind of admitting some fault. And the lot easier thing to do that GMs have done in the past, I'm not saying Monty's going to do it, but the lot easier thing would say, I put a good team around you. You didn't coach the talent the right way, or there was some fundamental disagreement, and I'm going to win out because I'm the GM and I talk to the owner while the coach is over there talking with the players every day. So again, I'm not saying that's what is happening, but if you continue to play 500 basketball and play inconsistent and have your coach just say it's an effort thing, some people are going to look around and say, how do we fix that? And the easiest way to fix that is to have people understand the severity of their actions.
And look, since this lineup change happened, we were all stunned when Mike made the decision to put Malik in the starting lineup. I think we kind of were looking at it as
desperate.
Maybe a Hail Mary. You can call it what you want.
Desperation,
Hail Mary, however you want to call it. Maybe, probably. Kings were sliding. They were, I think, 3 games under 500 at the time, looking for answers. And the offense was stagnant at that point. And now I think we can look at the sample size. We're almost to a 10-game sample size, 7 games. They're 4-3, 125 points per game during those 7 games, 48% from the field. 3-point shooting was around 32% as a team before. They're 39% over the past 7 games. So that's great. And the assist numbers are up too. They were averaging, I think, 24 per game before. They're 30 assists per game over the last 7 games. The offense has been incredible. Almost top 5 offensive rating. That starting 5, hard to find a more efficient or dangerous starting from an offensive standpoint. Yeah, you have the Celtics, you have the Clevelands down the line, you have teams that are dangerous. The Kings are up there too, almost top 5 in the league offensive rating. The problem, though, which we go back to time and again and again and again, times 25 times, however it was, what Mike said, even though the offense has been good, the Achilles heel of this team that really has single-handedly determined probably every close loss the Kings have had, and they've had 9 games where they've lost by 5 or less this year. They've still, over the last 7-game period, allowed opponents to shoot 38% from 3. That's even worse than their season average of 37.7%, which is 27th in the NBA. So, even though the offense has been great, even though Malik Monk looks like he belongs in the starting lineup, this team, and we saw it last night in the final 4 minutes of the game, the Nuggets, I think they hit 2 or 3 threes. Hard or difficult looks, sure, but they went down. They can't defend the perimeter. Maybe it's overcompensating for protecting the paint. Like I mentioned, they were top 2 in paint defense until they had a horrible night last night. But at what point do you kind of try to level things out and say, okay, maybe we need to kind of, I don't want to say hug shooters more or park on the perimeter, but they aren't where they need to be on the rotations. The closeouts aren't there. They're giving guys too much space on the perimeter to see daylight, and they're getting good looks. So I don't think it's a matter of teams are getting lucky anymore. We're almost 30 games into the year at this point now. This is a problem. It's a long-standing issue, like we've mentioned. But even though you make these lineup changes, you're still letting your teams almost shoot 40% every night from 3, and that's just not a recipe for success.
For sure. I do think it is, like you were mentioning, that overcompensating. You're trying to protect the rim because you don't have a rim protector. This is part of the reality of Domantas Sabonis being one of your stars. He's a great offensive player, a true hub that I think makes everybody around him better. But he takes a very specific type of player next to him for you to still be a really good defensive team when it comes to protecting the paint. Or you do what the Kings are doing and you overcompensate. You're helping like crazy. They're playing in gaps, and then it leaves everybody in rotation. And, at that point, it's like, all right, everybody on the floor, which is always the case. Everybody's trying to play on a string, but the details that come with that, when you're rotating the amount that you are, half a second where Keon Ellis doesn't realize that his guy cut behind him, or DeMar DeRozan is deciding to look over at Jokic, and because he's trying to play in the gap and they do a lot of 60-40s, they stick C on your man, say 40% in that help. And it's like, all right, if you're just caught at the right or I guess wrong time, depending on what side you're on, then there's just this whole chain effect. And I think that they don't have the recovery guys that are just out there making ridiculous plays defensively. Alex Caruso, a Marcus Smart, even a Derrick Jones Jr. to some aspect, as I list all the comps for my newest 2K player, as Chris knows. But anyways, I think the other thing that stands out to me here is that this is going to be even more of an issue when you're against teams that have elite playmakers, some of the smartest guys in the league that can pick you apart. Like last night it was in a different fashion, but it felt reminiscent to that Spurs game to me, where Chris Paul was just picking the Kings apart. And it's like you look at the end and it didn't feel like Chris Paul's stats were ridiculous. Jokic, somewhat of the same. Now, his stat line might look a little bit more ridiculous. It's also a guy that's a 3-time MVP. Ends the game 20 points, 13 assists, 14 rebounds. But I thought that he just can manipulate the game. Obviously, one thing that he's great at. And sure, there's a point where it's all right. Credit to Jokic, credit to Chris Paul. These are some of the best guys all time at doing this. You can go down the line in the NBA and you run into this a lot more than what people may realize. Like even if we just Lakers next 2 games, LeBron freaking James, Indiana, Tyrese Halliburton, Detroit, Cade Cunningham. Like these guys, and I'm not trying to say Tyrese and Cade are on the same level as LeBron or Jokic or CP3. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of teams in the NBA, you're going to see Dallas, Luka, have these guys that are going to recognize just a split second defensive mishap or a failed rotation. And with how much pressure you're putting on these guys, which I think you have to, sort of to your question, Frank, of like, do you try to even it back out? I don't know if you can, because then you're going to have even more nights like you did against Denver, where you give up 76 points in the paint. And now, obviously, they did that while still trying to defend the paint. But you can't just let teams walk in there. And I think that they're emphasizing the closeouts and everything. But it's almost the reality of the team and the reality of a lot of the Western Conference specifically in the modern NBA is they have elite playmakers that are going to be able to pick these sort of teams apart. And you're seeing that come to fruition. But I do feel a little weird because this team was 4-1 before this game and they lost this game by 1 point. I know it was in ugly fashion, but Mike Brown, I thought, said it pretty well last night. If they can't lock in play to play and be, his possession after possession, going back to that, they could still be a really good team. And I think that we've seen that in this stretch that you kind of pointed out since Malik has been starting. I thought they've been pretty good. It's just they can't be an elite team. And I think that's the whole struggle here. But is there some sense of optimism about how we've seen over these last 5, 6, I guess 7 games since Malik's been starting? Does it feel like they're starting to click and, you're getting a win streak in here and maybe it's just a loss every once in a while? Can they continue to climb the standings playing this type of basketball?
Real quick, I just want to say on the Denver front, I think the reason why that game yesterday, even though, like you said, they were 4-1 leading into that game, I think the reason why it felt so bad is because the layoff in between games. I mean, we haven't really talked about that, but for some reason, the Kings have played, I think, 2 games in like the past week and a half or something like that. They've had this really long layoff, and in a way, it was kind of like another training camp, I guess you could say, where they really had time to practice. Jay Crowder gets an opportunity to kind of really get integrated into things. I was surprised to see him not get more minutes in yesterday's game, but I think the disappointment is just that you had that layoff. You should be as rested as possible. You should be as clicking as possible. You understand maybe some rust, but the way they came out in that first quarter is just inexcusable. I mean, they allowed 40 points to the Nuggets in that first quarter, their first quarter back in action in almost a week and a half, and that's how they want to do it. And then, yes, they have the great second and third quarter and make this comeback and actually have the lead going into the fourth, but then they blow it. And 4 minutes to go in the game, they're up by 10 to tie in, to wrap a bow on everything we've been talking about. You shouldn't even need to score when you're up 10 with 4 minutes to go. I think that's what's frustrating about them not getting the defensive end solved either, is it's losing them games when, yeah, your offense can be great, but your offense already did enough work. We just need you to get a couple stops in the last couple minutes there of the game, and it's completely different. But, yeah, I think that the real reason why it felt different was because of the long layoff.
The one thing I'll say about that also is that maybe not the same extent of a long layoff, but they had 3-4 days earlier this year. I want to say it was after Atlanta. I can make sure I have that right here. After their road trip in Atlanta, they played on the 18th. They had 3 days off before they played on the 22nd against the Clippers. And I remember us having the same conversation of this team should be well rested. They had 12 points in the first quarter, and then they had 17 points in the second quarter. Like Jay Crowder was kind of joking in a, we need to be better fashion in the locker room that like sometimes teams do come out flat after these. It feels like it goes one way or the other, right? You either come out and you have great energy or you come out flat. And Jay Crowder was even acknowledging like, Denver had been a little bit more of a rhythm, not an excuse. He was just talking casually with some people. But second time we've seen them have a little bit of an extended break and they come out flat.
Yeah, and like just kind of looking at their splits right now, and it's just like the definition of mid. Like on second night of a back-to-back, 3-3. With 1 day of rest, 8-8. On 2 days of rest, 1-0. Now 3 days of rest, like you mentioned, they played 4 games on extended rest. They were 1-3 in those games. So getting right, having time to heal up.
Bye.
Wow.
Frank's gone. Okay.
Frank just fully left that.
Dipped out. He said, "This is the point to make, and I'm gone." I think he's right, though. I mean, I
think he is. I would also guess that here. Let's get
him back in here. Frank, you want to finish your point?
He's so heated.
So mad. No, just the extended rest, I guess, is not really a positive. I think those are my last couple of words before I got.
Yes. No. You wrapped it up perfectly, and then you dipped out.
Said see you later. No.
Yeah.
But to kind of pivot, and Brenden, you asked about Malik and the starting five, and
Yes.
is there any reasons to be optimistic? I think so. Like I mentioned, the assist numbers are high, the offense is high. Malik, as an individual, it looks like he should have probably started a long time ago. But I know why Mike kept him in a bench role because of how valuable he was for their success. He always would call back to Manu Ginobili, Andre Iguodala. Of course, those are championship-winning 6 men right there. But Malik was, probably should have been 6th man of the year last year. I know the whole conversation with Naz Reid starting games. Now it looks like Malik's probably out of that running as well, or I can't imagine Mike putting him back into that role unless they make some kind of move. But 7 games as a start of this year, 18.1 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 44% from the field, 40% from 3, 94% from the free throw line, compared to 80 as a bench player. I don't know what it is about him being a starter or like what happened, but he's back to being his like automatic self from the free throw line. I do think that him and Fox have been playing off each other very well. I think that the 2-man game with Malik and Sabonis has been very good. I think that's a much more dynamic big that he's paired with, obviously, than anyone else that he's been with in the second unit, whether it's Trey Lyles or Alex Len. I know that Malik and Alex Len, they had a couple of 2-man like situations where Malik would find him for a lob or in the post by the basket. But I do feel like it's the right fit. I feel like the starting 5, I saw people floating, maybe putting DeMar in a super 6-man role. I don't think that's the recipe. I feel like the starting 5 is really, really good. It's surviving the minutes without them. And again, the bench that you roll out last night is just, and Keon Ellis has been playing well, like tip of the cap. 5 blocks last night, 12 points. I think he's shooting over 40% from 3. That's been great. But you need a bench wing, someone that's able to help now, like a Dorian Finney-Smith. If you get Kyle Kuzma, do you put him in a bench role? Those are only the 2 biggest names we keep hearing about. But there could be someone that comes up that we didn't really hear of and is able to kind of fill that void. But right now, the bench is 28. They dropped the 28th last night in bench points per game. It's been a non-existent impact. So I think Malik's been great in the starting 5, and I feel really good about that. I feel good about the starting 5 going forward, but I feel pretty bad about the bench. I mean, Kevin's going to come back. Trey's going to come back. Keegan's going to be playing again, hopefully by this weekend. But
we're a month out from Devin, if that matters.
Devin, we're in Colby Jones. We joke about Colby Jones because I was, on Matt's podcast saying that I thought he was going to be destined for great things. He's been playing his heart out there, man. He's been going after 50-50 balls. Had a nice block last night.
Can De'Aaron get him some shoes?
Did he?
Can he? Because this man is falling all over the place. Yesterday he fell like 4 times.
He is on the ground a lot. But he's hustling, man. He's
That's
a dog.
a sign of hustle.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's going after loose balls. He's hustling, baby. But no, I do think that Devin Carter, I think I told you last night, Brendan, I would imagine that Devin Carter is going to be what the Kings hope is a better version of Colby Jones, just a guard that can defend multiple positions and rebound and be a positive on the offensive end. He has a weird hitch to his shot. Like, people were blowing up on a video from practice that I posted last week. A lot of people were quoting it saying, what is going on? It works. I mean,
I
people said
also
the same
don't think
thing.
that's anything new for what it's worth. His shot has always been funky.
People said the same thing about Tyrese Halliburton too. I mean,
Right.
and he's maybe not this year as much, but
Said the same thing about Robert Woodard too.
They said the same thing about Bobby Wood. But I mean, I guess, how do you guys feel? Do you guys feel that this has been the right move, or was it overdue to put Malik in the starting five? Or do you still are you in like my boat as far as starting five is great, but it's the depth and the bench that are really the main issue here?
I do want to say real quick on the Devin Carter front that watching Strother and Peyton Watson yesterday, and I guess I have to throw in Hunter Tyson too, watching them really just have impact on the game yesterday did kind of remind me, like, this is what hopefully the payoff will be when Devin comes back. It's not that Devin Carter is going to, I mean, who knows, whatever, but it's not that he's potentially going to be a starter or whatever. Maybe he's going to contest to make us forget about De'Aaron Fox or whatever. It's just that he's going to be a productive player that comes in and has impact on a lot of nights, and it doesn't have to be that he's going to come in and score 15 or 20 points or whatever. It can just be, wow, Devin Carter came in for 20 minutes tonight and he scored 8 points, had 4 rebounds and a steal and a block. Like, it's just that it's another person doing things out there, keeping things going. And I don't know. I mean, as we talk about their depth and their bench really struggling throughout the year, thankfully Kevin's kind of picked it up recently, but I do kind of think that there's just going to be some value in having somebody else out there. Like, look at how Keon impacted the team last year. Just having a new piece out there that feels fresh, that feels like they're contributing. I think just something as simple as that, and Devin doesn't have to be great. He just has to kind of do what we think his tools lend him to do. I think it's going to be a really big impact.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. I think the energy. I also think he's just like, I used this for Westbrook yesterday. I probably overused it a little bit, but I think he's a maniac, like, in the best way possible. Like, I mean that as a compliment, an infectious energy guy,
Right.
Just a dog on the floor, really, to try to put it simply, I guess. But Keegan Murray, I think, makes a big difference for this team defensively. He wasn't out there, I think, a big aspect of last night. But to your starting question, Frank, I agree. Like, the starting group looks good, and the bench obviously is not giving you much. I think that is partially a result of starting Malik, and the fact that starting group looks good. I think you could also point to, like, well, yeah, that's why that group was closing games, which was already the case. And so I thought it was a desperation move. I think Mike Brown, as we've talked about, has been very clear that he did not want to start Malik Monk. He'll reference the old Spurs where he's told us pretty straight up that he loves Bruce Bowen, but nobody in this group was going to sit and say that Bruce Bowen was a better player than Manu Ginobili. It's just for the overall team construction. It's so you don't have this 5-minute stretch at the end of the first, start of the second, where De'Aaron Fox is the only guy out there, and you have those disgusting lineups, to be honest, like Frankie mentioned earlier. And so I still kind of think that Malik in that bench spot might be the most optimal thing for this team. I don't know if you can go back at this point. And I guess one aspect I'm curious about is, say you go get a Cam Johnson, a Dorian Finney-Smith, a Kyle Kuzma. Who starts? Do you go back to Malik coming off the bench? Does the guy that you bring in come off the bench?
I think if you were to swing a trade of that caliber, it might, because I think Malik has said multiple times that he'll do what's best for the team. And I do feel like right now the best course of action is for him to start. But if you go get Cam Johnson, or I would say Finney-Smith is someone I could see probably coming off the bench, just a general feel. I could be completely wrong. Might be nice to have a versatile defender in the starting five, which maybe makes more sense, I guess, now I'm thinking about it. But I feel like if you get a Cam Johnson or Kuzma, it's kind of easier to say, okay, Malik being in the second unit makes more sense now. And you kind of stagger those minutes a little bit and find it along the way. Because we're looking at a situation now where if you get a Finney-Smith, that might mean Keegan's off the floor late if he's not performing well. I mean, it kind of just might change the way that they game plan. Because right now, I don't think you can think of any situation where Keegan Murray needs to be off the floor right now. But that was a problem a couple of years ago. I'm bringing up our old pal Marvin Bagley, where Luke Walton would keep other players on the floor late in these games and have Bagley, was a decent player on offense during his time at the Kings. Like, he wasn't horrible on offense. I think he was 14 points per game on 55% shooting. Second jump, off the floor late in games for the Mo Harklesses, even for Nemanja Bjelica, because bigger body and able to kind of hold his own more in post situations. Like, we could see a situation where if you go get a player like that, maybe it's not Malik that has to really worry about seeing the floor less. It might be somebody else. And Keegan right now is been under a microscope because of his offensive struggles, but his defense right now has been kind of a saving grace for the Kings so far. It could have been a lot worse. Like, if they had him last night as well, that probably would have been a huge help. Did they win the game? Maybe they win the game if he's playing last night and he's able to defend Aaron Gordon a little bit. But I do think if they were to acquire a big name, Malik probably would be the player that has to shift to the bench. I don't think you can acquire Kuzma or Cam Johnson. For sure, probably not Cam Johnson. You can't put Cam Johnson on the bench, in my opinion. Like, I don't see how you can resonate doing something like that when he's been playing the level he's been playing at this year. But it's intriguing because I don't know if they're going to go get a player like that. I really don't know if they're going to get a player that's been mentioned like heavily. I feel like it'll be someone that we haven't really heard of and it probably won't be Cam Johnson, because don't you think that someone's going to be able to offer a lot more for Cam Johnson when he's the best wing available on the market?
I think Cam's going to be expensive. I think Cam's going to be more pricey than what is justified. I feel like Brooklyn's going to hold out for something as close to 2 first-round picks as they can get, and I fundamentally don't think he's worth 2 first-round picks, and I do kind of feel like that's been the holdup on the Kings side. I feel like they definitely know they need a guy like Cam Johnson. I just think that they don't want to overpay for him, and with the competing market, like you mentioned, I think they probably feel like they're not negotiating from a position of power right now. And you see that the Dennis Schroeder trade. I don't really know how I feel about the value in return and who won that deal. But I think that it shows that Brooklyn is definitely active in trades and is very willing to make these things happen. But I just think that Brooklyn is obviously in the position of power right now, and they're not gonna let it give for anything less than what they feel like is the market value right now. But in terms of just the general conversation, I really do think, and Frank, I know you said you don't like the talk about it, but that's where I'm willing to entertain the DeMar DeRozan coming off the bench, and it really doesn't have anything to do with DeMar's skill level, his talent, or anything like that. It is really more just of the same explanation we can give for Malik Monk. It's that we need some pop off the bench, and we could probably use somebody like, I'll even just say Dorian Finney-Smith. If Dorian Finney-Smith is added to this team, I think, from a sticker shock perspective, it might scare a lot of people to see, wait, DeRozan's moving to the bench and we're throwing in Finney-Smith instead. But I just feel like if DeMar is going to be this, uncontrollable scorer who you can just feed him the ball and he can get you 15 to 20 points any night, if that's what the Kings need from him and if that's what they're pretty much primarily getting from him, I don't really think that there's a problem with bringing him off the bench, playing him 20 to 25 minutes a night and seeing, hey, if he's really got it going, we can put him in the closing lineup. And if not, we have this option of, it's going to be Dorian Finney-Smith, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan. 2 of those 3 guys would play or would finish on a given night, and it's just kind of feed it to the hot hand.
I think it, like to your point, like you said, it follows the same logic as Malik. I think quite identically, really when it comes down to it. It's just the logistics of it, the politics of it, even of, this is your star. This is the biggest free agent that's signed in Sacramento.
Yep. And
are you going to move him to the bench? Or even on the Malik side, is Malik now going to be cool with going to the bench? Like, no clue. Like,
is it easier to ask a 15-year vet to go to the bench or a guy who's been waiting to get into the starting lineup, finally gets into the starting lineup, and then pull it immediately away?
Both are probably tough sells, but who knows?
That's why he gets the big bucks.
Yeah, absolutely. But they all are out there on the floor in closing situations, which, like you mentioned, the starting lineup being good, Frank, to me, like that's, like I said, I think it's, if you're out there at the end of games, you can still get that same lineup. And I think that we did see that throughout the course of yesterday. Obviously, with no Keegan, sometimes that was Keon, sometimes that was Colby. Doug came into the game at the very end, which I think Mike said he kind of ended up regretting it a bit in hindsight. But the clutch numbers haven't been great for the Kings this year. What I will point out, though, before going into this season's numbers is that like last year's actually were not as great maybe as they seem to get talked about. 39 clutch scenarios last year, 20 and 19 in those games. So nothing fantastic. 108 offensive rating, 105 defensive rating. And so just one game above 500 in the clutch last year, which is any game within 5 points with 5 minutes or less left. 16 games already this year. The Kings are 6-10. They have a 120.9 offensive rating in that time. Reading these numbers after looking at those 01-02 stuff is still crazy to me. But that is sixth in the NBA, 120.9 offensive rating in the clutch, 117 defensive rating in the clutch, though, which is 21st in the NBA. By the way, somehow the Celtics are even worse defensively in the clutch than the Kings throughout the course of this year.
Wow.
That's gotta hurt, huh?
Yeah, I can't. Jay Crowder needs to get back over to one of these teams to make a difference. But has the clutch felt weird to you guys? They had moments last night where it felt like DeMar has that big dunk to put them up one, and obviously Jokic eventually hits the three after, if I have that order right in my head. DeMar seemed like he was going to get a very similar look on the other side of the basket, kind of bobbled it. De'Aaron had a good look from one of his spots, didn't go down, Does it feel like they're executing well in the clutch? Or I guess I'll start with my perspective really quickly. It does feel, I don't know if you need multiple of these guys, is really what it kind of comes down to. I think part of it is that a guy's able to catch a rhythm, a guy's able to know, like, all right, this is about to be me, and not that if there's multiple that ruins it, but I don't know how much better it makes you in the clutch necessarily either. It makes you harder to game plan for, but even before it was like, one guy is going to be the one doing the creating and the other guy just has to finish the play. And I still think that's fair, but that could have been Kevin Huerter. That could have been Keegan Murray, just a knockdown and open shot. That still could have been Malik Monk before. And I haven't felt like they've been bad in the clutch necessarily, but I also don't feel like adding DeMar, guy who's been top 3 in clutch player of the year, both years it's existed, De'Aaron already being here, he won the inaugural one. I don't feel like it's been noticeably different that, oh my God, this team is just ridiculous in the clutch now.
Nope, not at all. Hasn't been noticeable even a little bit. I mean, if you didn't tell anybody leading into this, just a casual Sacramento Kings fan, that hey, do you feel like the Kings are excelling? Like, definitely not. I mean, they wouldn't have any clue. I mean, of course, that De'Aaron does what he does, but if you didn't know anything about DeMar DeRozan, I don't think you would feel like, oh man, yeah, it feels like they have taken that element of the game to a whole nother level. I don't know if it's felt worse. I think some people out there feel like it's been worse. I think that's more of an expectation thing, but it definitely has not been what you were supposed to be. I mean, this was supposed to be an actual positive for this team. One of those things that I spoke of it personally in the offseason as like a record, almost like a record sliding glass door, if you will, where it's, hey, the King, typically, let's just say teams are supposed to go 500 in clutch situations. This should put the Kings on the plus side of that. And that just has not been the case. And I think, again, at the beginning of the year when I'm thinking about this team, I thought it was going to be some place where they can actually look to get into clutch moments and say, we have an advantage here that we are going to use the same way you could say, hey, we have great rebounders, and they don't. And it just has not panned out that way at all. I don't know if it's some grand statement on, like you're saying, Brenden, where I don't know how much it matters because there is only one ball, or if it's just that this collection of, or I should just say De'Aaron and DeMar don't really play off of each other very much in the clutch. But however you want to slice it, it definitely has not been what it was supposed to be. And it's felt like, I don't think it's felt like taking turns, but it just hasn't felt like either of them has really taken a hold of those clutch moments, though I guess you could say De'Aaron more so than DeMar.
Yeah, there's been moments too, like the Phoenix game. That was one of the most fun I've had watching a game this year. Just Fox and DeRozan taking turns, just putting the game away in the fourth and overtime. Miami
would have been a moment too. Huh?
Last night was, I mean, DeRozan literally he catches that pass, the game's over.
He literally dropped the ball.
The game's over. If he catches that ball, the game is over. I mean, I've watched that play a million times over. I don't think Jokic can get there. If he does, it might have been an and-one or a foul. He's just gonna reach. Catches that ball, game's over. I mean, Brenden and I talked about it after the game last night too. Like there was that little baseline midi, like Brenden said all day, and I thought it was for sure going. I mean, he was automatic in the third quarter. Didn't happen. Like there have been good moments and there's been bad. I mean, again, the Kings have lost 9 games this year by 5 points or less. I think 3 of those are by 1 point. So is it early in the season? Yeah. Is there still time for this to kind of be a different conversation once we get to, the spring months? Sure. But you want to see more from them. Like this is why DeRozan is here. You brought DeRozan in to kind of take some pressure off De'Aaron Fox, and Malik Monk's been a help there too. He has his moments late in games, and last night he had a big third quarter, but you want to see it more consistently. You definitely want to see it more consistently. And real quick, I do have one thing. While we're talking about De'Aaron Fox, just before I forget, I know we have to go in a few minutes. This is a soundbite from him talking about his future with Draymond, and I haven't listened to the whole thing. I hope that Draymond does not curse, but if he does, I don't think he will. But here's De'Aaron on his future with Draymond.
Play the season out. For me, man, it has all to do with just the team, the organization. Where are we going? I want to make sure that we're in a position to try to win in the future, because that's ultimately what I want to do. Like I know I make enough money, regardless of where I play or what I do. Like I'm gonna be fine, unless God forbid, knock on wood, that you have a career in injury. But aside from that, like I feel like I'm continuing to get better as a player every year. Mm-hmm. But for me, are we looking like we're continuing to get better year after year, and are we going to be able to compete at a high level? And that's all mine is. Like if we can show that this year, like you sign the extension now. If not, like obviously I still have another year, but that's where my mindset is. At some point, will we be able to compete for a championship or really compete at a high level for a long time? Just play this.
Fair. I mean, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, but I think that's fair. Another reminder, though, he will not make as much money if he signs with another team than the Kings. But like you mentioned, he doesn't really care about money that much. He says he knows he'll make enough money for his career. That's fine. But that's the first time he's actually spoken and explained, I guess. So I don't know if you guys have anything to take away from that or not, but
I think that last piece you said is what stands out to me the most. It's the first time. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing it, that we've heard him, it be from him directly. I guess we've heard quotes. I think there was a Slater article earlier in the year, sort of transcribed. I think it's a little different hearing him saying it. And, I kind of in my mind am like jokingly thinking like, oh, this guy's got an earpiece in. Rich Paul is the third person in on this call with the 2 clutch clients. There's something there. 2 clutch clients on a podcast.
On the strings.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on there, but I also think it's just, I don't know if any of it needed to be said necessarily. Not like he shouldn't have said it, but I think it's all obvious. What player wants to keep losing over and over and wants no chance to actually compete for a championship team? Look at it from De'Aaron's perspective specifically. If there's a team like Houston, for example, which not saying
just a completely random example, but his hometown team.
Random.
Totally random. There's not a pair of Fox ones that already fit the color scheme or anything like that. But he could go be the number 1 guy on that team. And if he thinks he's good enough to be a number 1 on a championship team, which I would bet very much so that he thinks he can be, and I think there's a decent chance that he at least could flirt with that conversation, and it's TBD. But I don't think it's a hard no way, at least in my mind. Why would you not want to do that at some point in your career? How much do players get talked about differently based on if they were winning or losing throughout the course of their career when it comes to what their legacy is? So I think De'Aaron's always been very committed to Sacramento. I think it's just like at some point, are we going to do something? Because he's been, from my perspective, patient for a long time. And it's like, all right, are we going to take this next step? I think this is him putting pressure, though, a little bit. I've been a little bit in maybe not in denial, but hesitant to believe the extent of how much De'Aaron is really feeling this. So I think hearing it from him, it perked my ears up a little bit. But again, I think it's all obvious that you could have read between the lines. And I don't think any player is going to be like, yeah, I'm cool with being in the play-in every year. Like, I've made the playoffs one time. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
I just don't know what else he's really supposed to say. I mean, it was all fairly, I won't say obvious, but yeah, like if you know the situation, I mean, that's obviously what De'Aaron's looking out of it. I think the thing is, I just don't really know what to do with it because it's such a moving target, right? Like, I mean, you could say the Kings did everything that De'Aaron just described this offseason, but didn't really work out. And so what do you do with that? I mean, if you're De'Aaron, you say, I mean, obviously it's results, like you said. I mean, I don't care how hard you tried. This is a did you or did you not business. And if the Kings aren't a good team, De'Aaron can't say, well, they really did try, and I think it's the effort that counts. They do have to at some point turn it around, but it's just, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't really know what to do with it because I would say that Monty McNair did, I won't say everything, but to get DeMar DeRozan over here, that's a pretty big feat. To get Malik Monk to re-sign here when I think everybody thought that dude is gone. He's might as well get your timeshare in Orlando right now because he's going. And I think the fact that
both things, by the way, that seem to be very approved by De'Aaron Fox.
Yes, and Mike Brown as well. Mike Brown gets re-signed. There's some stability in the coaching ranks, and in, I guess you could say, the front office, if you will. So it's kind of a, again, I totally understand what De'Aaron's saying. I don't think he's lying or anything like that, but I just think that it's something that is subjective. De'Aaron Fox gets to decide what is good enough or not. If the Kings make it out of a first round, but don't really have they've reached their ceiling, well, they were more successful, but there's not, it's just a very much, like I said, a moving target that De'Aaron can do whatever he wants with, which is fine. It's his career, it's his life. He needs to control it, but I mean, in terms of trying to freak out or glean onto a comment, I just don't really know what to do with it in terms of, thinking he's going to leave.
And like, coming from a guy who just watched Juan Soto leave
Nice.
his team for the...
Didn't leave the city, but just left the team.
Left the borough, went to the good old New York Metropolitans. I look at it as the fact that, this is De'Aaron Fox, who's, I think, going to be turning 27 in 2 weeks, or this week. Is his birthday like tomorrow or day after tomorrow?
See here, De'Aaron Fox's birthday,
December 20th.
December 20th.
Yeah, turned 27. So this is a guy that's going to be 28 years old, entering free agency. It's going to be his one shot for like that super max contract. I mean, it's going to take him through his age 33 season, 32, 33 season. So he deserves that right. He deserves that right to say, hey, is this where I want to spend the bulk of my prime, the bulk of my, those championship chasing years, or however you want to call them. And I think the Kings on the other end of the stick have to kind of do the same thing. Look in the mirror and say, okay, is this the player we want to hitch our wagon to? Undoubtedly, paying him $70+ million a year at some point in these new contracts. Like, is this who we want to build around? And if the answer is yes, which I believe the Kings would be answering today, that yes, that is a player they want to build around, you extend everything you can for him. And some of it's out of your control. De'Aaron has to qualify for the Supermax, and that might play into the Kings' favor. But at the same time, maybe it won't. If De'Aaron can't qualify for the Supermax in Sacramento, maybe that pay cut signing elsewhere isn't as steep. Like, but I do feel like it's not something to really look at right now as a concern. And I think that's posturing, him saying if they're winning or they're proving something this year, he'll sign. I don't think he's going to sign anything until, if he gets an all NBA team, sure, I think maybe he'll sign it. But if he doesn't, why not just wait? And Like you said, the injury is always a risk. That might be a reason why he may sign. But I look at it as, you can put yourself in a position where you really can wait it out. Make the Kings have to look at it and say, do we move him if by next deadline they're not a winning team or where they should be? I mean, it can go in a variety of different directions, but a temperature check, I still think he's more likely to stay than not. I feel like this is all, like you said, the nature of the business. But then again, money talks, whether he said it or not. Look at Juan Soto, man. He took that money. Apparently his mom, there's an allowance for his mom to have Like there's like
Gotta
a
get a suite,
wardrobe
man.
allowance. He has a suite, which the Yankees wouldn't pay for.
Yeah. Derek Jeter
I don't
didn't
think.
get a suite, so why should
Well,
we?
De'Aaron doesn't need a suite, thankfully, because we see his family sitting courtside every game. So courtside tickets are enough.
I'm still a little hung up on the fact that this is two Rich Paul clients talking about contract negotiations on a podcast. Like,
and
It
you
does
know they
kind of
do
feel
it.
like
are we
chess.
living
It
in right
really
now?
feels like chess, not checkers.
Yeah,
But you know it's
yeah.
they had to have talked about it before they started recording. Like, yeah, I'm
100%.
going to ask you about this, and they probably, yeah, it's all good. We're briefed. We're briefed on the Rich Paul PR firm here. Like, we're good to go.
Yeah. I think your point though, like De'Aaron pointed out, that he could wait another year. He has, after this season, has a $37 million, not even an option. It's just a year left on this deal.
Final year.
Yep. And if he were to sign the Supermax, by the way, this offseason, I also don't think that stops these conversations. You know, it makes it so there's 1 year where he's like a poison pill contract, and it makes it pretty much impossible to trade him for that 1 year. But that still could be on the same, we could still be on the same timeline. And I still think all the same conversations would exist, even if he became eligible of that Supermax contract next year. Cause it's like, all right, like you said, there's no reason for him not to sign that in my mind. I think you take that deal, and then you see guys decide pretty not long after, like, I'm done, you know? And I think this still could be a reality, even if he got that Supermax. So perks my ears up a little bit, because I don't feel like we've really heard it directly come from his mouth, even just like hearing him say it rather than transcribed quotes, I think stands out a little different, because I don't feel like I've ever heard him really address it in that manner, really.
Frankie, do you remember what happened the last time the Kings were faced with a potential Supermax player?
Buddy
Heading
Hield?
into that expiring. That was not what I was thinking.
That wasn't
might be
Supermax.
That might be
Oh, I
correct.
do remember. I do remember.
He was traded at the All-Star game. And
yeah.
that's if you're a Sacramento Kings fan, that's exactly why you want to avoid that situation that De'Aaron just laid out. Because Frankie, I mean, the week before that trade happened, I would have told you that the Kings are going to sign DeMarcus Cousins to a $200 million contract, and a week later he was on the New Orleans Pelicans.
Every insider and Vlade publicly said, "Hey, look, that's the cat named after Tyrese Halliburton, isn't it?"
Sure is.
Well, see you later. Like every insider though, and every tea leaf, everything was pointing to the Kings signing Boogie to that extension. And Vlade, again, openly, which he probably should not have done because they need to walk it back later on. They were going to sign him. I think Boogie also has said publicly he thought that he was going to sign it, and it didn't happen. Which that Supermax now I think would be not even. I mean, the way the contract
just be getting wrapped up.
Yeah, the way I think it would have ended a year ago.
Oh my
and
God.
I think it would have I think it would have ended in 2022, 23. I think he would have been on the beam team, the first beam team. He would have been on the roster for that. But yeah, look, no one knows what's going to happen. Like I do think if I had to bet on it, he'll probably stay, or they'll sign him to a contract. Whether that means if he stays or not, I don't know. But I look at it as they can't really afford to let him go. They can't really afford to try to cash in and get a return back for that. That moves into a rebuild. And then that means you have to move Domantas Sabonis. You can't really sit on a 29-year-old center at that point and try to build around him. Like that's not really the kind of player that you have being the number 1A option. So I do think if they really believe in this core, I think the Vivek and ownership are going to, they're going to put the money out there and see if Fox takes it. But we don't know what he's going to do. Again, he has Rich Paul in his corner now. He might be looking at bigger things, but winning solves everything. That is a saying that I do believe in wholeheartedly. Unless the Yankees win the World Series, who knows? Maybe Soto would have stayed.
I was gonna say
maybe Soto would have stayed, but winning usually solves everything. So if the Kings start winning or they make the playoffs this year, maybe we're having a different conversation. I really don't want to talk about Soto. It's my own fault for bringing it up.
You brought it up, bro, and your whole tone changed.
I'm hurt. I'm recovering.
I really thought you were just going to say, and this is coming from a guy who just saw Juan Soto leave his favorite team and then not have a point. Just bring up the fact that Juan Soto left.
I'm recovering.
Yeah.
The one other thing I'll say is that, well, first of all, there's plenty more problems or things that the Kings could clean up around the rest of the roster outside of De'Aaron Fox. But I do think there's also a reality of this is maybe the best season of Fox's career. They still could he could do more to set the tone, I think, defensively for this team. Like when they had that, and he's been, I thought, really good throughout most of this year defensively. But that first quarter, for example, like Fox could have done more in that stretch. He did not score in his first stint. I know he plays maybe 5 minutes to start the game, and he seems to always have been a guy that looks to get his teammates involved a little bit more early here. But I do think there's like, it almost feels a little unfair to just be like, everybody else needs to get their stuff together. I also think there is a slight aspect of like, Fox could be better. Now, that is very far down my list of what needs to go right with the Sacramento Kings. And yeah, I'm not trying to place it on Fox, but I do think there's a reality here. If Fox is actually in this first team All NBA conversation, that I do think he could eventually have some capabilities of, and we've seen it, that 60-point night. You can't replicate that all the time, obviously, but then the Kings are in a different situation too. So I'll just say I don't think he's fully blameless in this, even though I would point it to a lot of different situations before him. It's just kind of the reality of the situation and where they're at right now. But overall, they were 4-1 before this loss to Denver. They lost by 1 point on a night where they don't have Kevin Huerter, they don't have Keegan Murray, they don't have Trey Lyles on an already very thin team. So I think for the most part, they're better than their 500 record so far. I don't know how much better, maybe 3-4 games, I'd say. It's really that stretch where their offense was bad. I don't think we'll see that as much throughout the course of this year. And I think that makes me feel better than where they currently sit in the standings, 12th place that they are in the standings. I think they are better than that, but I don't know that we're talking top. I don't think we're talking top 4 necessarily either for everything that we laid out here. So kind of where I'm at overall. I will say I think trending in the right direction, but still some, highlightable flaws that are discouraging when it comes to the long-term outlook of what this team may look like, that obviously needs to win if they want to keep their superstar around.
And real quick, I don't know how this metric is measured on Basketball Reference, but the expected win-loss record of the Kings so far should be 16-11. That's what I don't know what that is based off of. I tried to find it in the key. I don't know, but according to Basketball Reference, that their measured win-loss record should be 16-11, and that makes sense, seeing that they've been in like their net rating. I think someone put on Twitter last night. It was like there's a polar bear in Sacramento because their point differential, the Kings have the 7th best point differential in the Western Conference right now. But yet they're in 12th in the conference because they can't win these close games. So closing thoughts for me. Yeah, I do think they're close. I don't think things are very bleak. I think they have a great opportunity in front of them still. They have the Lakers twice, and they have the struggling Pacers on Sunday. You have the Pistons coming to town after Christmas. I do think you got to take 3 of the next 4 to really kind of just really put yourself on a good track here. And specifically against the Lakers, I think taking care of business is important, especially when you look at the West is crazy right now. I mean, it really is just crazy just looking at it from the standpoint that the Kings are still only 2.5 games back of the 5 seed right now. And that means, though, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in between you and the 5 seed, separated by 2 games or less. So we're talking about the pendulum swing of losing 1 game like last night there could be repercussions down the line. And people always like to kind of joke, or people that maybe don't like sports as much, just 1 game, like it's just 1 game. Every game matters, man. I hate that. Every game matters so much. Like you miss the playoffs by 1 game. Like, and the Kings, I think they did it a couple times. They missed the play-in by 2 games, like in back-to-back years, I think. I think the bubble year and the year after that, they missed play-in by 2 games. Yeah, I don't want to hear that. Like, even last year, they missed the playoffs by 1 game last year. Like, every game matters, and you can't really, look at it that way, because 82 games, they go by quick. We're already a quarter of the way through, and the West is probably not going to – I don't know if it's going to be – I don't think things are going to get any easier is my last thought. Things are going to continue to be hard, close, and competitive, and the Kings are going to do their part.
My closing thoughts on a much lighter note. DeAndre Jordan washed very, very
That's
incredible. Like
he almost he almost got him though.
Just washed. He tried.
He almost got Domas.
That was his final test of like, do I have anything left? He tried to throw it down on Sabonis. Russell Westbrook not washed. I feel like Russ gets a really bad rap, and I feel like he has now done this on. I mean, you can even argue when he was on the Lakers, that was a lot of scapegoating, but it feels like Russell Westbrook, we see a lot of these guys late in their career, especially superstars, like go and like just be terrible locker room cancers and step on the floor and still think that they're superstars. Russell Westbrook just went out there and pretty much put out a triple-double, playing really solid team basketball, and now he's starting for the Nuggets. And I think that they actually like playing with Russell Westbrook. That definitely is not lost on me. DeMar DeRozan, his knees might be washed. I've been watching this all year, been trying to keep track. I think DeMar DeRozan, I don't know what happened this offseason. I don't know if he was doing too many book tours or something, walking around too many Barnes and Nobles, but that man, he just can't jump like he's been able to jump for really his entire career. He has been a leaper and really kind of like Vince Carter evolved into this shooter, jump shooter. I just don't know if he can dunk anymore. He really only pulls it out for special occasions. You obviously saw the big dunk last night in the clutch. He has 3 dunks on the year. That was one of them. The other one was that posterizer he had earlier in the year, and I can't remember what the third is. I just feel like DeMar DeRozan has lost a lot of his hops.
That's interesting. Keep tabs on that for sure. I remember when he had his first one. I guess I don't remember what it was, but Frank, I think you pointed out to me that was the first one.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah,
what?
Right. I was like, that was his first all year?
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? Like, that's his first dunk. Like, yeah, that's a great one on Basketball Reference. You can find how many dunks they have in a year. I think a year or two ago, Fox started dunking in out of nowhere, and I'm like, he's like doubled his dunks from the year before, and it was like game 40. So,
I think that was where Malik told him to start dunking the ball.
Yeah. Last thought for me also, maybe DeRozan's knees are slowing down. He's 35, but also Domas is back. We'll see how he is at practice tomorrow, but he was in hell for that last. Yeah, dude. Anyone out there listening, backs are they don't get better. They just don't get better. So hopefully he's again, but not everybody has the training staff the Kings have and the best medicine machines techniques in the world. Like I'm knowing Domas will probably be fine. He did not want to come out of the game. Apparently on TV, the sound picked up that he was like, "Don't take me out" when it happened. So, guy's a warrior and not gold blooded, but he's a warrior. And we'll see how he is tomorrow. We'll see how everybody is tomorrow. So make sure you tap in and see what Brenden, myself, and Chris have to say about who's at practice and back out there tomorrow.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody stuck around to talk to Domas yesterday in the locker room because that's one of those days, just to pull back the curtain a little bit, he always is typically the last one we're waiting on unless we get him at the podium. And on a day like that, you already know he's going to have a whole lot of treatment after the game. And didn't look like anybody stuck around. I did not stick around, and I didn't see anybody else put out things talking to Domas, but I'm sure we'll get him tomorrow, get an update there. So, yeah, as Frank said, stay tuned for that. Check out that coverage, SactownSports.com. Same thing, Sactown Sports on all social platforms on 1140, Sactown Sports 1140, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. radio shows. So tune into the great content going on there. And appreciate everybody listening, whether you're on the YouTube side, the audio side, anybody on the YouTube side, I'm sure is just as distracted by Frank and I, or as Frank and I are by Hallie here. Chris's cat, as mentioned,
loving it
for Halliburton.
Yeah, she is.
That's a chiller
for sure. But appreciate everybody listening. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes as we keep giving these to you guys throughout the course of the Sacramento Kings season. Likes, reviews, blah, blah, blah. All of it is more appreciated than you guys realize. So thanks for listening, and you'll hear from us again in the next couple of days here.